The massive Brahman bull pawed at the ground, muscles rippling beneath her sleek hide as she alternated between charging the fence line and returning to her calf. The ancient oak, victim to last night's lightning, had pinned the young animal to the dusty Texas soil. Blood seeped into parched earth. "Stand down," ordered Ryan, rifle raised. "Standard protocol." Four rangers positioned themselves around the perimeter while Connor Matthews stood apart, frozen by something beyond the immediate danger. The bull locked eyes with him, her desperate bellows shifting to something eerily like pleading. "Connor, your call!" Martha shouted from the ranch house porch, clutching her worn straw hat against the rising wind. The old ranger's weathered hand trembled on his belt. Recognition flickered across his face as the bull lowered her head, not in aggression, but submission. "Lord Almighty," he whispered. It's her. Leave a like and share your thoughts in the comments along with the city you're watching from now. Let's continue with the story. Wildfire Ranch sprawled across 500 acres of Texas hill country, its rolling pastures now golden brown under the punishing August sun. 3 months without significant rainfall had baked the land hard, cracking the earth and drying up two of the smaller stock ponds. The ancient oak trees, some predating the ranch itself, provided the only respite from the relentless heat, their shadows treasured by man and beast alike. Connor Matthews had known this land longer than he'd known himself. 45 years as a Texas Parks and Wildlife Ranger, with the last 20 stationed primarily at Wildfire, had etched the contours of these hills into his soul. At 67, his face was a topographical map of a hard life outdoors, deep creases around steel blue eyes that had witnessed both the beauty and brutality of nature, skin burnished to leather by decades under the Texan sun. "One more week," he muttered to himself as he eased his department-issued truck down the rutted access road. "One more week until retirement, until he'd hand in his badge and ranger hat for good." The thought brought no comfort. Martha Wilkins had owned Wildfire Ranch since her husband passed some 15 years back. At 72, she ran the operation with the same no-nonsense efficiency she'd always had, though lately Connor had noticed the weariness in her step. They shared a history that predated their wrinkles, grew up 3 miles apart, went to the same one-room schoolhouse until 8th grade, knew each other's sorrows like their own. "Gonna rain today," Martha had told him that morning when he'd stopped by the main house for coffee, a ritual as old as their friendship. "Feel it in my knees." She'd glanced out toward the eastern pasture, where the specialized Brahman herd grazed. "Check on Diamond for me, would you?" "She's close to her time." The Brahman cattle were Martha's pride, particularly Diamond, the massive cow with the distinctive white diamond-shaped marking on her forehead. The bloodline was special, developed partly by Connor's son Tommy before the accident 15 years ago. The boy had had a way with animals, a gentleness that seemed to communicate across species. "Gonna be a veterinarian," Tommy would proudly announce to anyone who'd listen. Until that summer day when everything changed. Connor pushed the memory away as he'd done countless times before. His hand instinctively reached for the faded blue handkerchief in his breast pocket, Tommy's handkerchief. Some habits couldn't be broken, not even after 15 years. Ryan Miller's Ranger truck appeared in Connor's rearview mirror, dust billowing behind it like a comet's tail. The young man had transferred from East Texas 6 months ago, bringing with him a by-the-book approach that often clashed with Connor's experience-honed methods. 28 years old and already gunning for a supervisory position, Ryan represented everything the department was becoming. More paperwork, more rules, less connection to the land and its creatures. "Expecting trouble?" Connor asked as Ryan pulled alongside, noting the tranquilizer rifle visible through the passenger window. "Just prepared," Ryan replied with that tight smile that never reached his eyes. "Got a call about a bull acting strange near the north fence. Thought I'd check it out." Connor nodded, unease settling in his gut like a stone. The north pasture was where Diamond's herd grazed. As if on cue, thunder rumbled in the distance. Connor gripped the steering wheel tighter as he navigated the rutted path toward the north pasture. The conversation with Martha from earlier that morning weighed heavily on his mind. "I'm selling the ranch, Connor," she'd said, her weathered hands wrapped around a coffee mug that read Wildfire Ranch Est, 1946. "Got an offer from those developers out of Austin. Good money, too." The news had hit him like a physical blow. What about the herd? What about Diamond's bloodline? Martha had looked away then, out toward the pastures where the special Brahmin cattle grazed. "Can't afford sentiment anymore. Property taxes keep climbing, and these old bones aren't getting any younger." Now, as Connor's truck crested the hill overlooking the north pasture, dark clouds gathered on the horizon. The barometer was dropping fast. He could feel it in his left knee, broken decades ago wrangling a rogue longhorn. Texas storms could turn violent quickly, especially after prolonged dry spells like they'd been having. Something caught his eye near the old fence line, a dark shape beneath the oldest oak tree on the property. A behemoth that locals claimed had sheltered Comanche long before white settlers arrived. Connor reached for his binoculars, adjusting the focus. "Sweet Jesus," he muttered, immediately accelerating down the hill. The ancient oak had split. One massive limb, itself bigger than most full-grown trees, had crashed to the ground. Beneath it, a young calf lay pinned, its tan hide visible against the dry grass. Standing over it, pacing and pushing frantically at the fallen limb, was Diamond, her muscular body tense with desperation. Connor radioed dispatch as he drove. "Got a situation at Wildfire Ranch, north pasture. Brahmin calf trapped under fallen oak. Mother is agitated. Need assistance and livestock equipment." He parked a safe distance away and grabbed his field kit. Diamond was no ordinary Brahmin. At nearly 1,800 pounds, she was powerful enough to flip his truck if she charged. Her breed was known for intelligence, but also for fierce maternal instincts. As Connor approached the fence line, Diamond's head snapped up. She let out a bellow that resonated through the ground itself, a sound of primal anguish that needed no translation. The calf's weak, responding cry twisted something deep in Connor's chest. "Easy, girl," he called, using the low, steady voice he'd learned from Tommy. "Easy now." Diamond pawed the ground, her dark eyes fixed on Connor. She snorted, tossing her massive head, then did something unexpected. She moved toward the fence where Connor stood, not in a charge, but with deliberate steps. The crackle of gravel announced Ryan's arrival. The younger ranger was out of his vehicle in seconds, tranquilizer rifle already in hand. "Stand back, Connor," Ryan called, raising the rifle to his shoulder. "Standard procedure for aggressive livestock." "She's not aggressive," Connor countered, raising a hand without taking his eyes off Diamond. "She's asking for help," Ryan scoffed. "That's a 1,800-pound Brahmin bull, not lassie. It's distressed and dangerous." Two more ranger vehicles pulled up, lights flashing. The commotion agitated Diamond further. She paced between the fallen tree limb and the fence, her movements becoming more frantic. "Give me 30 minutes, Connor said, turning to face Ryan and the newly arrived rangers. "Before you start shooting or tranquilizing anything." Ryan's jaw tightened. "Protocol says—" "I know what the damn protocol says," Connor interrupted. "I helped write it. This is different." The calf let out another cry, weaker this time. Diamond immediately returned to her offspring, attempting again to move the massive oak limb with her head and shoulders. Connor studied the scene, calculating. The limb had the calf pinned at the hindquarters, but the animal's front legs and head were free. It was still breathing, though clearly in distress. If they could lift the limb even a few inches— "That bull knows me," Connor said quietly, his eyes on Diamond's distinctive forehead marking. Ryan lowered his rifle slightly. "What do you mean, knows you?" Connor took a deep breath. "That's Diamond. She was born the day my son died. Same distinctive marking as her mother. Tommy was helping that mother give birth when—" He trailed off, the memory still too sharp after 15 years. A rumble of thunder, closer now, punctuated the silence that followed. The air felt electric, charged with the approaching storm and unspoken history. "I'm going in," Connor announced, checking his belt for tools. "That's against every safety protocol," Ryan protested. "At least, let us tranquilize the mother first." Connor shook his head. "Tranquilizer takes too long to kick in, and that calf doesn't have time. Besides, if Diamond goes down, she might fall on the calf." Before Ryan could argue further, Connor was through the fence. He moved slowly, deliberately, talking in a constant low tone. "Remember me, girl? Connor, Tommy's dad." "That's right." Diamond stopped her frantic movements, focusing entirely on Connor now. She lowered her massive head, snorting, her sides heaving with exertion. Connor continued his careful approach, hyper-aware that one charge from the distressed animal would be his last experience on Earth. 20 feet away, 15, 10. Diamond pawed the ground again, but didn't charge. Instead, she moved slightly away from the trapped calf, then looked back at Connor, then at the fallen limb. "I think she wants you to help," came Martha's voice from behind him. Connor hadn't heard her arrive, but wasn't surprised she'd come. This ranch was her life. "That's what I'm betting my retirement on," Connor replied without turning around. He was close enough now to see the calf clearly. It was a young bull calf, perhaps 2 weeks old, with the same white diamond marking as its mother. Blood matted its hind leg where the tree limb pinned it, but the bleeding wasn't severe. The real danger was crush injury, internal damage that could kill it slowly. "Dispatch says the nearest livestock rescue equipment is 40 minutes out," Ryan called from the fence. "Storm's making everything slower." Connor nodded, still maintaining eye contact with Diamond as he edged closer to the trapped calf. "Gonna check your baby," he told the massive bull. "Just gonna see how bad it is." To the amazement of the rangers watching, Diamond stepped back further, giving Connor access to her calf. Her eyes never left him, but she didn't threaten as he knelt beside the young animal. The calf's breathing was labored, its eyes wide with fear and pain. Connor ran experienced hands along its body, assessing what he could reach. The news wasn't good. The oak limb was crushing the calf's hip and lower abdomen. Even if they freed it, without immediate medical attention, the internal injuries could be fatal. "We need to get this limb off now," Connor called back. "And we need the vet here yesterday." Ryan was on his radio immediately, upgrading the situation. The other rangers prepared ropes and what equipment they had on hand. As Connor turned his attention back to the calf, something caught his eye. A small blue thread snagged on the calf's ear, the exact shade of blue as Tommy's handkerchief. Connor's breath caught in his throat. Diamond made a low, rumbling sound and nudged Connor's shoulder gently with her muzzle, a gesture so unexpected that the rangers at the fence raised their rifles instinctively. "Hold your fire!" Martha shouted. "She's not attacking." Connor remained perfectly still as Diamond's breath warmed his neck. Then slowly she backed away again and returned to pushing at the tree limb as if demonstrating what needed to be done. A radio crackled to life. "Weather Service has issued a severe thunderstorm warning for the county. All field personnel advised to seek shelter within 20 minutes. The first heavy raindrops began to fall, pattering on the dry ground and raising the scent of dust and thirsty earth. The rangers looked at one another, their expressions a mix of concern and uncertainty. Connor stood, decision made. "We're not waiting for equipment. We do this now or this calf dies." Connor's declaration hung in the air like the static electricity that now charged the atmosphere. The approaching storm painted the landscape in ominous shadows. the wind picking up strength with each passing minute. Diamond stood protectively near her calf, her massive head swinging between Connor and the trapped young animal. "You're not thinking straight," Ryan argued, his voice raised to carry over the strengthening wind. "That's a 2-ton oak limb. Even with all of us, we'd need equipment." Connor's weathered face hardened as he studied the scene. The younger ranger wasn't wrong about the physical challenge, but what Ryan couldn't understand was the weight of the past that pressed on Connor's shoulders, far heavier than any fallen oak. 15 years ago, Connor began, his eyes never leaving Diamond. "My boy Tommy was in this same pasture, different tree, same situation. A newborn calf in trouble." The rangers fell silent, even Ryan. Everyone in the department knew about Connor's son, but few had heard the story directly from him. He was helping a first-time mother Brahmin, Diamond's mother, with a difficult birth. Connor's voice grew distant, lost in the memory. "I told him to wait for me, but Tommy, he always had to help right away. That was his nature." A jagged bolt of lightning split the sky, followed by a thunderclap that seemed to shake the very ground. The calf cried out weakly, and Diamond responded with a low, mournful sound. "I was up at the main house when I heard the screaming," Connor continued, the words coming faster now as if the approaching storm was forcing them out after years of containment. "By the time I got there, Tommy was on the ground, the bull standing over him. I shot her without hesitation." Martha stepped closer to the fence, her lined face filled with understanding. "But that wasn't the whole story, was it, Connor?" Connor shook his head slowly. "Took 3 years before I could bring myself to watch the video from the security camera Martha had installed. Tommy wasn't attacked by the bull. There was a mountain lion. Came out of nowhere, going for the newborn calf. The bull was trying to protect both the calf and my boy." The rain began to fall in earnest now, fat droplets that darkened Connor's uniform and slicked Diamond's hide to a glossy sheen. "I killed her for nothing," Connor's voice broke. "And then I convinced Martha to cull most of that bloodline because I thought they were dangerous. Except Diamond," Martha added. "Born the very day Tommy died. Connor wouldn't let me sell her." Ryan lowered his rifle completely, understanding dawning on his face. "So this calf is part of a promise I made," Connor finished for him. "A promise to my dying son to take care of these animals." The moment was interrupted by another plaintive cry from the trapped calf. Diamond bellowed in response and renewed her efforts to move the oak limb, her powerful muscles straining against the immovable wood. Tommy was working on developing a more docile, disease-resistant Brahmin strain, Martha explained to the gathered rangers. "More suitable for family ranches, less aggressive. This bloodline is his legacy." Connor approached the trapped calf again, kneeling despite the mud now forming beneath his boots. The rain plastered his gray hair to his forehead as he examined the situation more carefully. "The limbs caught on that rock outcropping," he observed, pointing. "If we can get some leverage, we might be able to lift it just enough for the calf to pull free." Ryan approached the fence cautiously. "Even if that's possible, the mother won't let us near enough to try." As if understanding his words, Diamond turned her attention to Ryan, her dark eyes assessing. She pawed the ground once, then did something that left the young ranger speechless. She backed away from the calf, moving to the side of the fallen limb. "She wants us to help," Connor said simply, the ghost of a smile touching his lips for the first time that day. The senior ranger began issuing instructions, his authority unquestioned despite the unorthodox situation. 2 rangers were sent to gather fence posts for leverage, while another retrieved hydraulic jacks from the trucks. Ryan, still visibly skeptical but willing to follow Connor's lead, coordinated with dispatch for medical support for the calf. "Storm's getting worse," Martha observed, clutching her jacket tighter around her thin frame. They're saying possible flash flooding in the low-lying areas. Connor nodded grimly. All the more reason to move quickly. As the Rangers assembled the makeshift rescue equipment, Connor approached Diamond again. The massive bull watched him intently but made no threatening moves. I need you to trust me," he said softly, extending his hand palm up as Tommy had once taught him, "just like your mama should have been able to trust me." To everyone's amazement, Diamond stretched her neck forward and allowed Connor to touch her wet muzzle. The contact lasted only a moment before she withdrew, but the message was clear. A tentative truce. The rain was coming down in sheets now, making the rescue attempt more dangerous by the minute. The ground beneath the fallen limb was turning to mud, threatening to further complicate their efforts. "We've got one shot at this," Connor announced as the Rangers positioned the fence posts as levers beneath the massive oak limb. "When I give the word, everyone lifts together. Martha, you'll need to guide the calf out when there's enough clearance." Ryan approached Connor, lowering his voice. "Your back won't take this kind of strain." "Let me coordinate the lift while you guide Martha." Connor started to protest but felt a twinge in his lower back. The old injury that had plagued him for years. Pride warred with practicality in his mind. "All right," he conceded finally. "But you follow my instructions exactly." As the Rangers took their positions, Connor felt a strange calm descend over him despite the chaos of the storm. 15 years of guilt and grief had led to this moment, a chance to make right what had gone so terribly wrong. "Everyone ready?" Ryan called out, his young face set with determination. The Rangers gripped their makeshift levers, feet planted as firmly as possible in the increasingly muddy ground. Martha knelt by the calf's head, whispering soothing words that were lost in the storm. Diamond stood to the side, watching with an intelligence that seemed to transcend her species. "Now!" Connor commanded. The Rangers heaved in unison, muscles straining against the enormous weight of the oak limb. For a heart-stopping moment, nothing happened. Then, with a groan of protest from the ancient wood, the limb began to rise, a fraction of an inch at first, then a full inch. "It's not enough!" Martha shouted over the storm. "The calf can't move!" Connor moved forward without hesitation, positioning himself beneath the partially raised limb. Despite the searing pain in his back, he braced his shoulders against the wet wood. "Connor, don't!" Ryan yelled, recognizing the danger immediately. "If we lose our grip—" But Connor was already pushing upward with everything he had, his face contorted with the effort. In his mind, he wasn't just lifting a tree limb. He was lifting the weight of 15 years of misplaced guilt. "Tommy," he gasped through clenched teeth, "I promised." What happened next would be retold in Ranger break rooms for years to come. Diamond, seeing Connor's struggle, moved forward and positioned her massive head beside him, adding her strength to his. Together, man and bull pushed against the limb, raising it those critical few extra inches. "Now, Martha," Connor managed to call out. Martha didn't hesitate. She grabbed the calf's front legs and pulled, guiding the frightened animal forward. For a terrible moment, the calf seemed stuck, its hind leg twisted at an unnatural angle. Then, with a final desperate tug, Martha pulled it free just as Connor's strength gave out. The oak limb crashed back to the earth with a sound like thunder, sending a spray of mud in all directions. Connor fell to his knees, pain radiating through his back in white-hot waves. But his eyes were fixed on the calf now, cradled in Martha's arms, its chest rising and falling with labored breaths. Diamond immediately abandoned Connor and moved to her calf, gently nuzzling its wet hide. Her massive frame shielded both the calf and Martha from the worst of the rain. "She's protecting us," Martha said in wonder, not attempting to move from her position. Connor tried to stand, but found he couldn't. The adrenaline that had carried him through the rescue was fading, leaving only exhaustion and pain in its wake. As he slumped back to the ground, his hand brushed against something in the mud, a small square of fabric so faded and dirty it was barely recognizable. With trembling fingers, Connor picked it up. Though stained with mud and faded almost beyond recognition, the pattern was unmistakable. It was Tommy's blue bandana, the one Connor had placed on Diamond's mother all those years ago, after he'd realized his terrible mistake. Ryan was at his side now, helping him sit up despite the downpour. "Medical's on the way," the younger ranger assured him. "For both you and the calf." Connor could only nod, his eyes fixed on the small piece of fabric in his hand. The blue thread he'd seen on the calf's ear, it had come from this, somehow preserved all these years, passing from mother to offspring in some inexplicable way. "She kept it," Connor whispered, his voice barely audible over the storm. "All this time, she kept a piece of him." As if in response, Diamond raised her massive head and met Connor's gaze. In that moment, the old ranger felt something shift inside him, a loosening of a knot that had been tightening for 15 years. Not forgiveness exactly, but understanding. The calf stirred in Martha's arms, attempting to rise on wobbly legs. Diamond immediately turned her attention back to her offspring, gently encouraging the young animal with soft nudges. "Connor," Martha called, her voice urgent. "The calf, I think its leg is broken, and there's blood coming from its mouth. We need to get it to a vet now." The brief moment of triumph faded as quickly as it had come. The calf had been freed, but its injuries might still prove fatal. Connor clutched Tommy's bandana tighter in his fist as the full weight of the situation pressed down on him once more. The storm raged on, unaware and uncaring of the drama unfolding beneath its fury, and in that moment Connor realized that saving the calf was only the beginning of a much longer fight, one that would test not only his body but his soul. The storm continued its assault on Wildfire Ranch as the rangers scrambled to create makeshift shelter for the injured calf. Martha's old horse trailer had been backed as close as possible to the scene, its rear doors open wide like a metal maw, waiting to swallow them all from the fury of the elements. Rain hammered the metal roof, creating a deafening percussion that matched the rapid beating of Connor's heart. "Careful now," Connor instructed as Ryan and 2 other rangers lifted the calf onto a tarp. The young animal let out a pitiful moan that cut through Connor like a blade. Diamond hovered anxiously nearby, her massive frame tense with maternal concern, dark eyes never leaving her offspring. "The vet's waiting at the barn," Martha shouted over the din of the storm. "Says he can't make it out here with the roads washing out." Connor nodded grimly, his rain-soaked clothes clinging to his aged frame. The blue bandana, Tommy's bandana, was now securely tucked into his breast pocket, a talisman against the gathering darkness. "We'll need to sedate her," Ryan said, nodding toward Diamond. "No way she'll let us take the calf otherwise." Connor shook his head. "No, she comes with us." Ryan's expression shifted from concern to disbelief. "You want to transport an 1,800-pound Brahman bull in a horse trailer with an injured calf? That's suicide, Connor." "Look at her," Connor replied, gesturing toward Diamond, who was now gently licking her calf's face, her movements surprisingly delicate for such a massive animal. "She knows we're trying to help. She's been trying to communicate that all along." Martha stepped forward, her weathered face set with determination. "Connor's right. I've never seen anything like it, but that bull understands more than any animal I've ever known." The young ranger looked between the 2 older adults, clearly torn between protocol and the unfolding situation that defied every training manual he'd ever studied. Finally, he gave a curt nod. "Your call, Connor. But if that bull charges in the trailer, there's nowhere to run." Connor's lips twitched in what might have been the ghost of a smile. "Wouldn't be the first time I've faced down death in a small space." His hand unconsciously moved to his lower back, where the old injury pulsed with each beat of his heart. With the decision made, the Rangers moved with practiced efficiency despite the unorthodox situation. The calf was secured on the tarp, its broken leg stabilized with makeshift splints fashioned from first aid kits. Throughout the process, Diamond remained watchful but calm, only occasionally voicing her concern with low, rumbling sounds that vibrated the very air around them. "Ready?" Ryan asked, positioning himself at one corner of the tarp. Connor nodded, then turned to Diamond. "Your baby's hurt bad," he said, speaking directly to the massive bull as if she were another ranger. "We're going to take him to someone who can help, but you need to follow us calmly. Understand?" To the astonishment of the younger rangers, Diamond lowered her massive head once, in what appeared for all the world like a nod of agreement. "I'll be damned," whispered one of the rangers. "You ain't seen nothing yet," Martha replied with grim satisfaction. The procession to the trailer was slow and methodical. The rangers carried the calf on the tarp while Connor walked backward, maintaining eye contact with Diamond, who followed several paces behind, her hooves sinking into the mud with each deliberate step. As they reached the trailer, a fresh challenge presented itself. The small ramp would never support Diamond's weight, and the height was significant. "She'll never make it up," Ryan said, voicing what they all were thinking. Connor studied the situation, rainwater streaming down his face. "Back the trailer up to that rise," he instructed, pointing to a small, natural elevation in the pasture. "We'll create a level entry." As Ryan repositioned the vehicle, Connor found himself alone with Diamond for a moment. The massive bull stood perfectly still, rain cascading off her muscular frame, eyes fixed on her calf now lying inside the trailer. "I'm sorry," Connor said quietly, the words nearly lost in the storm. "For everything. For not understanding. For what I did to your mother." Diamond's gaze shifted from the calf to Connor, her dark eyes seeming to hold wisdom beyond her species. She stepped forward, closing the distance between them until her massive head was just inches from Connor's chest. The old ranger held his breath, acutely aware that one toss of that powerful neck could end his life instantly. Instead, Diamond gently pressed her forehead against him, the white diamond marking on her head aligning perfectly with Tommy's bandana in Connor's pocket. The contact lasted only seconds, but in that moment, Connor felt something pass between them, an understanding that transcended words. "Trailers in position," Ryan called, breaking the spell. The next few minutes were a symphony of coordinated movement. The calf was secured inside the trailer, and Diamond, after a moment's hesitation at the unfamiliar space, stepped carefully inside. The rangers quickly secured the doors, and Martha took the wheel of her old truck. "I'll drive slow," she promised. "You follow with the medical kit." As the small convoy made its way back toward the main ranch buildings, Connor found himself in the passenger seat of Ryan's Ranger truck, his body finally registering the full extent of his exertion. Pain radiated from his lower back in waves that threatened to pull him under. "You need a hospital," Ryan observed, glancing at Connor's pale face. "Not until the calf is taken care of," Connor replied through gritted teeth. "I made a promise." Ryan shook his head but didn't argue. "That was something back there," he said after a moment of silence broken only by the rhythmic swish of the windshield wipers. "Never seen anything like it in all my training." Connor leaned his head against the cool glass of the window. "Some things they don't teach you in ranger school." "Like how to communicate with bulls?" Ryan asked with a hint of a smile. "Like how guilt can blind you to the truth," Connor replied softly. "For 15 years I've been carrying around this version of events, that my boy died because of a dangerous animal. Easier to blame the bull than to accept that sometimes bad things just happen." The lights of the main ranch compound came into view, the large red barn standing like a sentinel against the storm-darkened sky. Several vehicles were already parked outside, including Dr. Peterson's veterinary truck. Martha's trailer pulled up to the barn doors, and the ranch hands immediately sprang into action, opening the wide doors to reveal the brightly lit interior. Connor could see Dr. Peterson inside, his examination table already prepared. "Let me help you," Ryan offered as Connor struggled to exit the truck, his back screaming in protest. "I can manage," Connor insisted, though he accepted the steadying hand on his elbow. Inside the barn, organized chaos reigned. The calf had been carefully removed from the trailer and placed on Dr. Peterson's examination table. Diamond, to everyone's amazement, had followed docilely, positioning herself at the head of the table where she could maintain contact with her calf. "Never seen anything like it," Dr. Peterson muttered as he examined the young animal. "She should be going berserk in an unfamiliar environment with her calf being handled." "She knows we're trying to help," Martha said simply, as if that explained everything. Connor made his way to the examination table, each step a new lesson in pain. "How bad is it, Doc?" Dr. Peterson's face was grave as he continued his examination. "Broken femur, several fractured ribs, and I'm concerned about internal bleeding. The pressure from that tree limb did a number on his insides." "But you can fix him, right?" Connor pressed, unable to keep the desperate edge from his voice. The veterinarian looked up, his expression softening. "I can set the broken bones, but the internal injuries—" "He needs surgery, Connor. More than I can do here with my field equipment." "So we transport him to your clinic," Connor said, the solution obvious to him. Dr. Peterson shook his head. "The roads between here and town are washing out. Even if we could get through, I'm not sure he'd survive the journey in this condition." The words fell like physical blows. Connor looked at the calf, so small and vulnerable on the large metal table. Its breathing was labored, its eyes glazed with pain. Then he looked at Diamond, standing sentinel beside her offspring, trusting these humans to save what she could not. "There has to be something," Connor insisted, his voice breaking. "I can't lose this calf. I can't—" The unspoken words hung in the air. "I can't fail Tommy again." Martha placed a gentle hand on Connor's shoulder. "Connor, sometimes—" "No," he interrupted, shrugging off her touch. "We're not giving up, not when we've come this far." Ryan, who had been standing quietly by the barn door, stepped forward. What about a helicopter? Medical transport?" Dr. Peterson considered this. "If we could get a medical transport helicopter, I could stabilize him enough for the journey to my surgical facility. But in this weather—" "I know someone," Ryan said, already pulling out his phone. "My brother-in-law flies for emergency services in San Antonio. If anyone can get a chopper here in this weather, it's him." As Ryan stepped away to make the call, Connor turned his attention back to the calf and Diamond. The massive bull was making soft, rumbling sounds, almost like a lullaby to her suffering offspring. The calf's eyes, though clouded with pain, remained fixed on its mother. "You need to sit down before you fall down," Martha told Connor, pulling up a bale of hay. "You've done all you can for now." Connor reluctantly lowered himself onto the hay bale, his back screaming in protest. As the adrenaline of the rescue faded, exhaustion swept over him in a heavy wave. He found himself drifting, memories and present reality blurring at the edges. He saw Tommy, 10 years old and full of life, explaining with excitement how the Brahman breed could be improved with selective breeding for temperament without sacrificing their natural heat resistance. He saw the security camera footage he'd finally forced himself to watch 3 years after the accident, the mountain lion appearing from nowhere, the Brahman cow positioning herself between the predator and both Tommy and her calf, the terrible moment when Tommy, trying to help, had been caught in the chaos. "Connor?" Martha's voice pulled him back to the present. "Ryan's got good news." The young ranger approached, his face alight with cautious hope. "My brother-in-law says there's a brief window between storm cells. He can get a helicopter here in 20 minutes, but we'll need to set up a landing zone with proper markers. A flurry of activity followed as ranch hands and rangers worked together to clear an area near the barn and set up emergency flares to guide the incoming helicopter. Dr. Peterson prepared the calf for transport, inserting an IV line and administering medications to stabilize it for the journey. "What about Diamond?" Connor asked, struggling to his feet. "We can't separate them now." Dr. Peterson looked up from his work with the calf. "Connor, be reasonable. We can't put a full-grown Brahman bull on a medical helicopter." Before Connor could argue, Martha stepped in. "I'll take care of Diamond. She knows me, and we'll follow by road as soon as it's safe." Connor looked between Martha and Diamond, indecision written on his face. Then he reached into his pocket and withdrew Tommy's bandana, now somewhat dried from its time inside his jacket. "Take this," he said, handing the faded blue cloth to Martha. It seems to connect them somehow. Maybe it'll keep her calm until they can be reunited." Martha accepted the bandana with solemn understanding. "I'll guard it with my life." The distant thrum of helicopter blades announced the arrival of their air transport. Ryan rushed in from outside, rain dripping from his ranger hat. "They're coming in now," he announced. "We need to move quickly. The pilot says there's another cell right behind this one." As Dr. Peterson and the rangers prepared to move the calf, Diamond became agitated for the first time since entering the barn. She pawed at the ground, her massive head swinging between her calf and the barn doors where the sound of the helicopter grew louder. "She knows they're being separated," Connor said, moving to stand before the massive bull, despite the protests of those around him. "Diamond," he said firmly, looking directly into her dark eyes. "We're saving your baby. I promise you'll see him again." To everyone's astonishment, Diamond stilled, her intelligent eyes fixed on Connor's face. Then, slowly, she backed away from the examination table, creating space for the rangers to move the calf. "I'll be damned," Dr. Peterson muttered. "It's like she understands every word." "She does," Connor replied simply. As they carefully transferred the calf onto a special stretcher designed for small livestock, Diamond followed at a respectful distance, watching every movement with intense focus. When they reached the barn doors, however, Connor put up his hand to stop her. "This is where we part ways, girl," he said gently. "Martha will take good care of you." Martha stepped forward, Tommy's bandana held carefully in her hand. She approached Diamond without fear, holding the fabric where the bull could catch its scent. Diamond lowered her massive head, sniffing the bandana, then looked back at her calf being carried toward the waiting helicopter. "I'll stay with Diamond," Martha told Connor. "You go with the calf. He'll need someone he knows." Connor hesitated, torn between responsibilities. "I don't know if I can climb into that helicopter," he admitted, his hand going to his injured back. Ryan stepped forward. "I'll go," he offered. "I'll stay with the calf and keep you updated every step of the way." The older ranger studied the younger man's face, searching for something. Whatever he saw there must have satisfied him, because he gave a single, curt nod. "Take care of him," Connor said, his voice rough with emotion. "He's more important than you know." As the calf was loaded into the helicopter, with Ryan and Dr. Peterson climbing in beside it, Connor and Martha stood in the barn doorway with Diamond. The massive bull watched the helicopter lift off, her posture alert but calm, as if she somehow understood the necessity of this separation. "She's something special," Martha said, her voice barely audible over the fading sound of the helicopter blades. "Tommy saw it," Connor replied, his eyes still fixed on the disappearing aircraft. "He saw the intelligence, the gentleness beneath the strength. He was right all along." As the helicopter disappeared into the stormy sky, Connor felt the weight of the past 15 years pressing down on him once more. The calf's survival remained uncertain, hanging by the most tenuous of threads. And yet, For the first time since losing Tommy, Connor felt something else mingling with the grief and guilt. A fragile, tentative hope. The storm continued its assault on Wildfire Ranch, but within the shelter of the barn, something had shifted. Connor looked at Diamond, standing strong and patient despite her obvious concern for her calf. In her quiet dignity, her willingness to trust despite past betrayals, Connor found an unexpected teacher. "Come on," he said to both Martha and Diamond. "We've got a long night ahead of us." As Martha led the way deeper into the barn, Diamond fell into step beside Connor, their unlikely alliance forged in crisis and sealed with understanding. Together they would wait for news of the calf's fate, bound by a promise made to a boy who had seen the truth before any of them. Night had fallen over Wildfire Ranch, though the distinction between day and night had been blurred by the relentless storm that continued to pound the Texas countryside. Inside the main barn, Connor sat on a weathered wooden chair, his body rigid with pain and tension as he stared at his silent phone. The battery indicator showed 12%, just enough to receive one more call, one more update on the calf's condition. "You should let me drive you to the hospital," Martha said, approaching with a steaming mug of coffee. The rich aroma briefly cut through the familiar barn smells of hay, leather, and animals. "Your back's only getting worse." Connor accepted the coffee with a nod of thanks, but shook his head at her suggestion. "Not until I know." Martha didn't argue. In 40 years of friendship, she'd learned when Connor Matthews had set his mind to something. Instead, she pulled up another chair and settled beside him, her arthritic hands wrapped around her own mug for warmth. "Diamond's finally resting," she reported, nodding toward the large stall where the Brahman bull had eventually settled, though her massive head remained pointed toward the barn doors as if expecting her calf to return at any moment. "Never seen anything like it, Connor. It's like she knows we're on her side." Connor's weathered face softened slightly. "Tommy always said animals understand more than we give them credit for. Said we just need to learn their language instead of expecting them to learn ours." A comfortable silence fell between them, broken only by the rhythmic drumming of rain on the metal roof and the occasional rumble of thunder. Connor's mind drifted back to those summer days when Tommy would spend hours in this very barn, notebook in hand, recording observations about the Brahman cattle that fascinated him so much. "He'd be 16 if I hadn't let her go," Connor said suddenly, the words escaping before he could catch them. Martha's hand found his forearm, her touch gentle but firm. "You can't keep doing this to yourself, Connor. What happened to Tommy wasn't your fault. It wasn't the bull's fault either. Sometimes life just deals a terrible hand." "I should have been there," Connor insisted, the familiar refrain of his 15 years of grief. "If I'd gotten there 5 minutes sooner—" "Then maybe you'd have been killed too," Martha interrupted, her voice suddenly sharp. "That mountain lion was desperate and cornered. Tommy was trying to do the right thing, just like his daddy taught him." Connor flinched as if struck. In 15 years, Martha had never spoken to him so bluntly about Tommy's death. Before he could respond, his phone vibrated in his hand. Ryan's name flashed on the screen. "Ryan," Connor answered immediately, his voice tight with tension. "How is he?" Martha leaned in close to hear, her breath warm against Connor's cheek as they both strained to catch every word. "They've got him in surgery now," Ryan's voice came through, slightly distorted by the poor connection. "Dr. Peterson says it's touch and go. The internal bleeding was worse than he thought, but they're doing everything they can." Connor closed his eyes, his grip on the phone turning his knuckles white. "How long?" "At least another 2 hours," Ryan replied. "Maybe more. The doc says he'll know more once they get the bleeding under control." "I should be there," Connor said, more to himself than to Ryan. "No way you could have made it in this weather," Ryan assured him. "Roads are completely washed out between you and town. Even our emergency vehicles are stuck in place until morning at least." Connor nodded, forgetting momentarily that Ryan couldn't see him. "Keep me posted," he finally managed to say. "Will do." "And Connor?" Ryan's voice softened. "What you did today, I've never seen anything like it. That connection with Diamond, it was something special." After the call ended, Connor stared at the phone until the screen went dark. Martha waited patiently beside him, understanding that some thoughts needed time to form. "I didn't want to bring this up now," she finally said, "but you should know the developers called again this morning. They're getting impatient for my answer." Connor looked up sharply. "You can't sell, Martha. Not now." "I may not have a choice," she replied, her voice heavy with resignation. "Property taxes keep going up and the droughts cut my herd by nearly half. I'm running out of options." "What about Diamond's bloodline? Tommy's breeding program?" Martha sighed, suddenly looking every one of her 72 years. "That's why I wanted to talk to you. When that calf pulls through, he'll be the last of Tommy's special breeding line. The genetic traits Tommy was working on, gentleness, intelligence, heat resistance, they're all concentrated in that calf." Connor straightened in his chair, ignoring the spike of pain that shot through his lower back. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying that if you want to preserve Tommy's work, this might be your last chance." Martha met his gaze steadily. "The developers want an answer by the end of the week." The weight of her words settled over Connor like a physical presence. For 15 years, he'd been a bystander to Martha's struggles with the ranch, offering help where he could, but never fully engaging. Now, faced with the potential loss of not just the land but Tommy's legacy, something stirred within him, a purpose he hadn't felt since before his son's death. A sudden commotion from Diamond's stall drew their attention. The massive bull was on her feet, her head raised high, nostrils flaring as if catching a scent. She let out a low, rumbling call that seemed to vibrate the very air. "What's got into her?" Martha wondered, rising to her feet. Connor stood as well, wincing as his back protested the movement. He approached Diamond's stall cautiously, noting the alertness in her intelligent eyes, the way her ears swiveled forward with intense focus. "She senses something," Connor said quietly. As if in response to his words, Diamond pawed at the ground and let out another call, this one more urgent. She moved to the stall door, pressing against it with her massive shoulder. "Easy, girl," Connor soothed, placing his hand on the gate. "What is it you're trying to tell us?" Martha joined him at the stall, her expression concerned. "Connor, you don't think—" Before she could complete her thought, Connor's phone vibrated again in his pocket. With trembling fingers he retrieved it, noting the battery now at a critical 5%. Ryan's name flashed on the screen. "Ryan," Connor answered, his voice barely above a whisper. "He's crashing," Ryan's voice came through, tight with tension. The surgery was going okay, but his heart rate suddenly dropped. "They're doing everything they can, but Dr. Peterson says it doesn't look good." Connor felt as if the ground had vanished beneath his feet. He reached out blindly, finding the solid wooden stall door to steady himself. Diamond let out another low call, her dark eyes fixed on Connor's face. "Put me on speaker," Connor said suddenly, a desperate idea forming. "Let him hear my voice." "What?" Ryan sounded confused. "Just do it," Connor insisted. "Put the phone near the calf's ear." There was a moment of rustling, then Ryan's voice returned, more distant now. "Okay, you're on speaker. They're still working on him, but his vitals are dropping fast." Connor took a deep breath, then began to speak in the same low, soothing tone he'd heard Tommy use countless times with the Brahman cattle. "Hey there, little one. It's Connor, Tommy's dad. You hang in there, you hear me? Your mama's waiting for you. We're all waiting for you." As he spoke, Connor unlatched Diamond's stall door and stepped inside. The massive bull watched him intently but made no threatening moves. Instead, she lowered her head until it was level with the phone in Connor's hand. That's right, Connor continued, his voice gaining strength. You're special, you know that. You're carrying on something important. Tommy saw it. I see it now too. So you fight, you hear me? You fight to come back to us. Diamond let out a soft sound, almost a purr despite her massive size, her breath warm against Connor's hand holding the phone. Connor, Ryan's voice came through, astonishment evident even through the poor connection. I don't know if you can hear this, but his heart rate just stabilized. It's still low, but it's steady now. Martha gasped beside him, her hand flying to her mouth. Connor felt something break loose inside his chest, a knot of tension he hadn't realized he'd been holding. Keep talking, Ryan urged. Whatever you're doing, it seems to be working. For the next several minutes, Connor continued his gentle monologue, speaking to the calf about Tommy, about Diamond, about the ranch and the future that awaited him. All the while, Diamond remained pressed close, her massive head occasionally nudging Connor's arm as if encouraging him to continue. They've got him stabilized, Ryan reported finally. Dr. Peterson says he's not out of the woods yet, but his vitals are stronger. They're going to continue the surgery now. As the call ended, Connor's phone finally gave up, the screen going black as the battery died completely. He lowered himself to the straw-covered floor of the stall, his back screaming in protest, but his mind barely registering the pain. Diamond settled beside him with surprising delicacy for such a massive animal, her warm bulk a strange comfort in the chilly barn. Did that really just happen? Martha asked from the stall doorway, her voice filled with wonder. Connor shook his head slowly. I don't know. Maybe it was just coincidence. Maybe the doctors did something at exactly the right moment. Or maybe, Martha suggested gently, that Calf heard something he needed to hear. The voice of someone who cares whether he lives or dies. Diamond made a soft sound of what almost seemed like agreement. Connor found himself resting his hand on her broad forehead, right on the distinctive white diamond marking that had given her name. The contact was oddly comforting. You know, Martha said, settling onto a hay bale near the stall door, Tommy used to talk about how animals and humans used to understand each other better. Said somewhere along the way we forgot how to listen. Connor nodded, memories of his son's passionate theories about animal cognition washing over him. He was always going on about that, used to drive his teachers crazy, challenging their textbooks with his own observations. He was special that way, Martha agreed. Saw things others missed. The two old friends fell into reminiscence, sharing stories about Tommy that had been too painful to voice for many years. As they talked, the storm outside began to abate, the spaces between thunderclaps growing longer, the rain gentling from a pounding assault to a steady rhythm. Diamond remained beside Connor, occasionally adding her own soft sounds to the conversation, as if she too had stories to share about the boy who had understood her kind so well. In those quiet hours, something began to heal in Connor's heart, not the raw wound of Tommy's loss, which would never fully close, but the festering infection of misplaced blame and guilt that had poisoned his grief for 15 years. Morning was still hours away, and with it would come news of the calf's fate. But for now, in the warm shelter of the barn with Diamond's solid presence beside him and Martha's gentle companionship, Connor found a moment of peace he hadn't known since the day his world had shattered. I think I know what I need to do, Connor said finally, as the first hints of dawn began to lighten the eastern sky. About the ranch, about Tommy's legacy. Martha looked at him expectantly, hope and caution warring in her tired eyes. If that calf survives, Connor continued, his voice growing stronger with each word, I want to buy the north pasture from you. Use my retirement fund. Continue Tommy's breeding program properly, the way he would have wanted. Connor, Martha began, concern evident in her voice. That's your whole future you're talking about. Connor looked down at Diamond, who had raised her head at the change in his tone. Their eyes met in what felt like perfect understanding. No, he said quietly. "It's not my future I'm investing in, it's Tommy's. It's what should have happened 15 years ago if I hadn't been so blinded by grief." Before Martha could respond, the sound of a vehicle approaching caught their attention. Diamond was immediately alert, rising to her feet with surprising grace for her size. "That'll be Ryan," Connor said, struggling to stand with his stiffened back. "He promised to come as soon as the roads were passable." Martha helped him to his feet, and together they made their way to the barn door, Diamond following close behind. The eastern sky was now definitely lightening, the storm clouds breaking up to reveal patches of deep blue. A new day was dawning over Wildfire Ranch, bringing with it whatever news Ryan carried. As they stepped outside, the ranch truck came into view, mud-splattered but intact. Ryan was at the wheel, his face unreadable through the windshield. Connor's heart climbed into his throat as the vehicle came to a stop and the young ranger stepped out. Ryan's face was haggard from the long night, dark circles under his eyes testament to his vigil. He looked from Connor to Martha to Diamond, who had pushed forward to stand at Connor's side. "Well?" Connor managed to ask, his voice barely audible. Ryan's exhausted face broke into a tired smile. "He made it through the surgery. Dr. Peterson says it's a miracle, but he's stable. Actually, he says it's the damnedest thing he's ever seen. Like the calf just decided he wasn't ready to die." The news hit Connor with physical force, and he might have fallen if not for Diamond's solid presence beside him and Martha's hand gripping his arm. Relief flooded through him, so intense it left him lightheaded. "Can we see him?" Martha asked, her voice thick with emotion. Ryan nodded. "That's why I'm here. Dr. Peterson thought the calf might do better if his mother was nearby during recovery. I've got a special transport trailer hooked up if you think Diamond will cooperate." Connor looked down at the massive bull standing quietly beside him, her intelligent eyes already focused on the trailer attached to Ryan's truck. "I think she'll cooperate just fine," he said. "She knows her baby needs her." As they prepared for the journey into town, Connor felt a strange sense of rightness settle over him. The path forward was suddenly clear in a way it hadn't been for 15 years. Tommy's work would continue, his vision would be realized, and maybe, just maybe, the healing that had begun in this barn during the long night would continue as well. The first full rays of the morning sun broke through the clouds as Diamond walked calmly into the trailer, guided by nothing more than Connor's gentle voice and the promise of reunion with her calf. In that golden light, Connor could almost see Tommy standing there, notebook in hand, smiling his approval at the unlikely alliance between man and bull. "You were right, son," Connor whispered to the morning air. "I'm finally listening." The veterinary clinic on the outskirts of town was a modest building, its white exterior weathered by years of Texas sun and storms. Today, it stood as a beacon of hope for Connor as Ryan's truck pulled into the gravel parking lot, the trailer carrying Diamond following behind like a solemn procession. The storm had passed, leaving behind a washed-clean world that sparkled in the morning light, puddles reflecting the blue sky like scattered mirrors. "Dr. Peterson says we should bring Diamond around to the back," Ryan explained, carefully navigating the trailer through the narrow driveway that curved behind the main building. "He set up a temporary pen connected to the recovery area where they're keeping the calf." Connor nodded, his body rigid with pain and exhaustion, but his mind clearer than it had been in years. The drive into town had been slow and careful, with Ryan taking each turn gently to avoid disturbing Diamond. Throughout the journey, the massive bull had remained surprisingly calm, as if she understood the purpose of this unusual trip. As they pulled up to the rear entrance, Dr. Peterson emerged from the building. The veterinarian looked as tired as Connor felt, his surgical scrubs rumpled and stained, dark circles shadowing his eyes. Despite his evident exhaustion, he managed a smile as he approached the trailer. "You folks are witnessing a miracle," he announced without preamble. By all medical logic, that calf should not have survived the night. The internal bleeding was severe, the trauma to his organs substantial. But something kept him fighting. "How is he now?" Connor asked, his voice rough with emotion. "Stable, but critical," Dr. Peterson replied honestly. "The next 24 hours will tell the tale. I've seen cattle pull through worse, but I've also seen them give up with less. It all depends on his will to live." Martha stepped forward, her face lined with concern. "And you think having his mother nearby will help?" Dr. Peterson shrugged. "Can't hurt. Animals sense more than we give them credit for. If he knows his mother is close, it might give him that extra push he needs." Connor thought of Tommy and his unwavering belief in the emotional intelligence of animals. "It'll help," he stated with certainty. "Diamond's not just any mother." The process of unloading Diamond from the trailer was undertaken with careful precision. The temporary pen had been constructed with sturdy cattle panels, creating a space adjacent to the clinic's rear recovery room. A large window would allow Diamond to see and smell her calf without being able to physically reach him. "She's going to walk right in," Connor told the skeptical veterinary assistants who stood ready with tranquilizer darts. "Just open the gate and step back. Doctor." Peterson started to protest, but Ryan raised a hand. "Trust him on this, Doc. I've seen what this bull can understand." With cautious movements, the rear trailer gate was lowered. Connor stood at the opening, making soft clicking sounds with his tongue that Tommy had once used to calm nervous cattle. Diamond appeared at the trailer's entrance, her massive frame blocking the light, her dark eyes taking in the unfamiliar surroundings with evident intelligence. "Your baby's in there, girl," Connor said quietly, gesturing toward the clinic. "Come on now." To the amazement of everyone except Connor, Diamond stepped carefully from the trailer and walked directly to the pen gate. She paused only once, turning her head to ensure Connor was following. When he nodded encouragement, she continued forward into the pen, positioning herself immediately at the window that looked into the recovery area. "I'll be damned," Dr. Peterson muttered. "In 30 years of veterinary practice, I've never—" "Tommy would say we just don't listen enough," Martha said softly, coming to stand beside the veterinarian. "He always believed animals understand far more than we think." Inside the recovery room, the calf lay on a large padded table, tubes and monitoring equipment attached to his small body. His breathing was shallow but steady, his eyes closed in sedated sleep. At the sight of her offspring, Diamond let out a soft, rumbling sound that seemed to vibrate the very air. The calf's ear twitched in response. "Did you see that?" Connor asked, moving closer to the window that separated the recovery room from Diamond's pen. "He heard her." Dr. Peterson nodded slowly, his skepticism giving way to professional curiosity. "Let's give them some time. Sometimes medicine can only go so far. The rest is up to them." As the veterinarian led Martha away to discuss the calf's treatment plan, Connor found himself alone with Ryan at the window. Diamond had settled herself as close to the glass as possible, her massive head angled to maintain visual contact with her calf. "You should get that back looked at," Ryan said after a moment of silence. "I can see how much pain you're in." Connor grimaced but didn't deny it. "Soon." "Not yet." Ryan studied the older ranger thoughtfully. "You know, when I first transferred here, I thought you were just a stubborn old-timer set in his ways. Couldn't understand why headquarters spoke so highly of you when all I saw was someone counting down to retirement." "And now?" Connor asked, genuinely curious. "Now I think I understand," Ryan replied simply. "It's not about the badge or the protocols. It's about connection. To the land, to the animals, to the history of a place." Connor nodded, something warm unfurling in his chest at the younger man's words. "Took me 15 years and one stubborn bull to remember that," he admitted. Tommy knew it instinctively. That boy could read an animal better than most people can read a book. They fell into companionable silence, watching as Diamond maintained her quiet vigil. After some time, Dr. Peterson returned with Martha, his expression cautiously optimistic. "His vitals are improving," the veterinarian reported. "Blood pressure's stabilizing, heart rate stronger. Can't explain it medically, but having his mother here seems to be making a difference." Connor felt a weight lift from his shoulders. "What happens now?" "We keep him stable, monitor for any setbacks, and hope for the best," Dr. Peterson replied. "If all goes well, he could be strong enough to transport back to the ranch in a week or so." Martha cleared her throat. "About that," she began, her eyes finding Connor's. "I've been thinking about what you said earlier, about buying the north pasture." Connor straightened, ignoring the flash of pain down his spine. "I meant it, Martha, every word." "I know you did," she replied with a sad smile. "But it wouldn't be enough. The developers want the whole ranch or nothing. 5,000 acres, water rights included. They're planning a resort community with a golf course and artificial lake." The news hit Connor like a physical blow. "But the herd, Diamond's bloodline. That's what I want to talk to you about," Martha continued. "I've got a counteroffer for you, old friend." Before she could elaborate, one of Dr. Peterson's assistants burst into the room, her face flushed with excitement. "Doctor, you need to see this," she exclaimed. "The calf, he's trying to stand." They rushed to the recovery room door, peering through the glass at the small figure on the examination table. Sure enough, the calf was struggling to raise his head, his front legs making weak pawing motions against the padded surface. Diamond, seeing the movement, let out an encouraging sound, pressing closer to the window. The calf's head turned toward his mother's voice, his eyes struggling to open. "It's too soon," Dr. Peterson muttered, hurrying to check the monitoring equipment. "He shouldn't even be conscious yet, much less trying to move." Connor moved to the window separating Diamond from the recovery room, placing his hand against the glass. The massive bull noticed the gesture and shifted her attention momentarily from her calf to Connor. "That's it, girl," Connor encouraged softly. "Keep calling to him. He needs to hear you." As if understanding his words perfectly, Diamond returned her focus to her calf, making a series of soft, almost melodic sounds that Connor had never heard from a Brahmin before. The calf responded with increased efforts, his small body trembling with exertion. "His vitals are actually improving with the effort," Dr. Peterson observed with amazement. "Heart rate strong, oxygen levels rising. It's like he's willing himself to recover." "Tommy would say he has something to live for," Martha commented, her voice thick with emotion. "Something more powerful than pain or fear." The next few hours passed in a strange, suspended state of hope and anxiety. Connor refused to leave the clinic despite his increasingly painful back, choosing instead to settle on a bench near Diamond's pen. The massive bull seemed to draw comfort from his presence, occasionally turning to look at him as if checking that he remained nearby. By late afternoon, the calf had progressed from weak movements to actually managing to sit up on the examination table, though Dr. Peterson had added protective railings to prevent him from attempting to stand fully. The broken leg had been set and casted, the internal injuries stabilized, but full recovery was still far from certain. "You need to get that back looked at, Connor," Martha insisted, returning from a quick trip to bring fresh clothes and food. "You're white as a sheet, and I can see you flinching every time you move." Connor started to protest, but was interrupted by Ryan, who had returned from filing his official report at the ranger station. "She's right," the younger ranger said firmly. "There's a clinic right next door. I'll take you over and you'll be back before anything changes here." Cornered by their concern, Connor finally relented. "Fine, but only if Dr. Peterson promises to call immediately if there's any change. The adjacent human medical clinic was small but efficient. Within an hour, Connor had been examined, x-rayed, and given both pain medication and a stern lecture about ignoring a potentially serious back injury. The diagnosis was a severe strain of previously damaged muscles, along with inflammation that was pressing on his sciatic nerve. Bed rest for at least a week, the doctor instructed, writing out a prescription, and no heavy lifting for at least a month. You're lucky you didn't do permanent damage with that stunt you pulled. Connor accepted the prescription with poor grace. Can't rest yet, Doc. Got unfinished business. The doctor sighed, recognizing the stubborn set of Connor's jaw. At least use these properly, he said, handing Connor a pair of crutches. And take the medication as prescribed. That back needs time to heal. When Connor returned to the veterinary clinic, he found Martha deep in conversation with a man he didn't recognize. Tall, well-dressed in a casual way that still managed to convey wealth, his silver hair perfectly styled despite the humidity left by the storm. "Connor," Martha called, gesturing him over. "This is James Harrington from Lone Star Development. He's the one handling the ranch purchase." Connor's jaw tightened, but he managed a curt nod as he maneuvered himself and his new crutches toward them. "Mr. Harrington." The developer extended his hand, which Connor reluctantly shook. "Mrs. Wilkins has been telling me about your remarkable rescue yesterday," Harrington said, his voice carrying the polished tones of urban Texas rather than the rural drawl Connor was accustomed to. "Quite extraordinary." "Just doing my job," Connor replied stiffly, his eyes moving past Harrington to the recovery room window. The calf was sleeping now, his small chest rising and falling in a steady rhythm. Diamond remained at her post, her watchful presence unchanged. "Actually," Harrington continued, seemingly unperturbed by Connor's chilly reception, "that's what I'd like to discuss with you. The unique nature of this Brahmin bloodline and the extraordinary intelligence you've witnessed." Connor's attention snapped back to the developer. "What about it?" Martha stepped in, her expression a mix of caution and hope. "James has an interesting proposition, Connor. One that might solve several problems at once." Harrington nodded, gesturing toward the bench where Connor had been sitting earlier. "May we sit? I understand you've had a rather difficult 24 hours. Connor reluctantly settled onto the bench, the pain medication beginning to take the edge off his discomfort. Harrington and Martha sat beside him, forming a small semicircle that felt oddly like a business meeting despite the surroundings. "Mrs. Wilkins tells me this calf represents the culmination of a breeding program your son began 15 years ago," Harrington began, his tone respectful. "A program aimed at developing Brahmin cattle with enhanced intelligence, docility, and heat resistance." "That's right," Connor confirmed cautiously. Tommy believed the Brahmin breed had untapped potential, more intelligence than most people give them credit for. Harrington nodded thoughtfully. "From what I witnessed when I arrived, that bull understanding exactly where her calf was and communicating with him through glass. I'd say your son was onto something significant." Connor remained silent, waiting for the other shoe to drop. Developers didn't typically show interest in cattle breeding unless there was profit involved. "Our development plans for Wildfire Ranch include what we call heritage elements," Harrington continued. "Features that preserve and showcase the authentic Texas ranching tradition while providing modern amenities for residents and visitors." "You mean a petting zoo," Connor said flatly. Harrington smiled slightly. "Actually, I was thinking of something far more substantial. A working demonstration ranch within the development, maintaining a select breeding herd of these exceptional Brahmin cattle with educational programs based on your son's research." Connor blinked, caught off guard by the suggestion. "You want to preserve Tommy's breeding program?" "With proper funding, facilities, and scientific support," Harrington confirmed. Mrs. Wilkins would receive fair market value for the property, plus a percentage of the demonstration ranch's revenue. And we'd like to offer you a position as head consultant for the program, overseeing the continuation of your son's work. The proposal hung in the air between them, unexpected and complex. Connor looked to Martha, whose expression remained carefully neutral, allowing him to form his own opinion. "Why?" Connor asked finally, his voice rough with emotion. Why would a development company care about a teenager's breeding program from 15 years ago? Harrington leaned forward, his expression sincere. "Two reasons, Mr. Matthews. First, it makes good business sense. Eco-conscious, historically significant attractions add tremendous value to residential developments. Second," he hesitated, then continued more quietly, "my own son is studying veterinary science at Texas A&M. His specialty? Bovine cognition and welfare. When Mrs. Wilkins told me about what's happened here, I knew this was something special worth preserving." Connor sat back, his mind racing with possibilities and concerns. The idea of Tommy's work continuing, properly funded and scientifically supported, was tempting beyond words. But the thought of Wildfire Ranch, transformed into a manicured resort community. "I need time to think," he said finally. "And to see if this calf pulls through." Harrington nodded, rising to his feet. "Of course. I'll leave you my card. Our offer to Mrs. Wilkins stands until the end of the week, but I'm willing to work with you both on the details of the Heritage Ranch, regardless of the timeline." After the developer departed, Connor and Martha sat in silence for several long minutes. The only sounds the soft beeping of the calf's monitoring equipment and Diamond's occasional rumbling calls. "I know it's not what you had in mind," Martha said finally. "It's not what I had in mind either, when Jacob and I built this place from nothing. But times change, Connor. I can't keep fighting the property taxes and the drought and my own aging body." Connor nodded slowly, understanding all too well the limitations age imposed. "And the developer. Do you trust him?" Martha sighed. "As much as you can trust any businessman, I suppose. But he seemed genuinely interested in Tommy's work, not just using it as a selling point." She paused, then added softly, "It would be something, wouldn't it? To see Tommy's name on a research center, his work continuing long after we're gone." The possibility settled into Connor's heart with unexpected warmth. For 15 years he had carried Tommy's memory as a private burden, a wound that wouldn't heal. The thought of his son's passion and insight benefiting others, becoming a legacy rather than simply a loss, was both terrifying and exhilarating. "Let's see if our miracle calf makes it through the night," Connor said finally. "Then we'll talk about miracles of the human variety." As the evening deepened into night, Connor maintained his vigil alongside Diamond, the massive bull's steadfast presence, a reminder of everything he had misunderstood and everything he stood to gain. In the quiet hours, as the medication dulled his physical pain and clarified his thoughts, Connor found himself speaking aloud to Diamond, to the sleeping calf, and perhaps to Tommy himself. "I think I finally understand what you were trying to tell me, son," he whispered into the dimly lit room. "About listening, about connection. Took me 15 years and one stubborn bull, but I'm finally hearing you." Diamond turned her massive head toward him, her dark eyes reflecting the soft light with an intelligence that no longer surprised him. In her steady gaze, Connor saw not just an animal, but a partner in grief and hope, a creature who, like himself, had faced loss and pain but continued to fight for what remained. The calf stirred in his sleep, a small sound escaping that was immediately answered by Diamond's rumbling call. Even through glass and medication and medical equipment, their connection remained unbroken. Watching them, Connor felt something shifting within himself. Not an ending to his grief, but a transformation of it into something that might, with time and care, bear fruit instead of thorns. Morning would bring decisions that would shape the future of Wildfire Ranch, of Diamond's bloodline, and of Tommy's legacy. But for now, in this quiet moment of connection, Connor found a peace he had thought forever lost on the day his son died. Whatever tomorrow brought, he would face it with open eyes and an open heart, finally ready to listen to what the world and Tommy's memory had been trying to tell him all along. Dawn broke over the veterinary clinic, painting the eastern sky in hues of pink and gold that gradually pushed back the darkness. Connor awoke with a start, momentarily disoriented by the unfamiliar surroundings. He had spent the night on the padded bench near Diamond's pen, his body protesting even through the haze of pain medication. Sometime during the night, someone, Martha most likely, had draped a blanket over him. Across the room, Diamond stood at attention, her massive head pressed against the glass that separated her from the recovery room where her calf lay. The bull hadn't moved from her self-appointed post all night, maintaining her silent vigil with a dedication that would have surprised anyone who thought of cattle as mere livestock. "Morning, girl," Connor said softly, his voice rough with sleep. "How's our boy doing?" As if she understood the question perfectly, Diamond turned her head toward Connor, then back to the window with a soft, rumbling sound that seemed almost like an invitation. Wincing as his back protested the movement, Connor carefully levered himself up from the bench and reached for his crutches. Dr. Peterson was already in the recovery room, checking the calf's vital signs and examining the various tubes and monitors attached to the young animal. When he spotted Connor at the window, he gave a thumbs up and a tired smile. "He made it through the night," the veterinarian reported as he emerged from the recovery room. "Stronger than I expected, too. Vital signs are stabilizing, and the internal bleeding has stopped completely." Relief washed over Connor like a physical force. "So he's going to make it?" "Barring any unforeseen complications, yes," Dr. Peterson confirmed. "I've been practicing veterinary medicine for 30 years, and I've never seen an animal with this kind of will to live, especially not one so young." Connor's gaze returned to the calf, who was now awake and alert, his dark eyes fixed on his mother through the glass. Despite the tubes and the cast on his leg, there was a vitality to the young animal that hadn't been there the day before. "When can he be reunited with Diamond?" Connor asked. Dr. Peterson considered the question carefully. "Normally, I'd say not for several days, but given the unusual circumstances and the obvious connection between them..." He shook his head in wonder. "If his progress continues at this rate, perhaps as soon as tomorrow we could move him to a controlled environment where they can have physical contact." The sound of the clinic's front door opening announced the arrival of Martha and Ryan, both carrying trays of coffee and what smelled promisingly like breakfast tacos from Rosie's Cafe down the street. "Brought you some real food," Martha announced, handing Connor a wrapped package that radiated warmth. "Hospital food'll kill you faster than whatever put you in there in the first place." Connor accepted the offering gratefully, suddenly aware of how hungry he was. "The calf's going to make it," he informed them, unable to keep the emotion from his voice. "Doc says he's got a will to live like he's never seen." Ryan nodded, unsurprised. "After what I witnessed yesterday, I'd believe just about anything about that calf and his mother." He handed Dr. Peterson a coffee. "Oh, and I've got news." "The story's spreading." "What story?" Connor asked between bites of his breakfast taco. "About Diamond and the rescue," Ryan explained. "Someone at the ranch posted a couple of pictures online of you and Diamond working together to lift that tree limb. It's gone. What do the kids call it? Viral. News vans started showing up at Wildfire Ranch this morning. The station chief called to give me a heads up." Connor froze mid-bite. "News vans? Why would anyone care about a ranch accident?" Martha snorted softly. "Because it's not every day a man and a bull work together to save a calf, Connor. People are calling it a miracle. Some religious folks are saying it's a sign. A sign of what? Connor demanded, uncomfortable with the attention. Of understanding between species, of redemption. Martha shrugged. People see what they want to see. But the point is, Harrington called me this morning. He's seen the coverage, too. Connor set down his half-eaten breakfast, suddenly less hungry. And he's more interested than ever in the Heritage Ranch concept, Martha replied, her eyes searching Connor's face. Says this kind of story is exactly what would make the educational component successful. He's talking about expanding the proposal to include a research center focused on bovine cognition and human-animal communication. Dr. Peterson, who had been listening to the exchange with interest, interjected, "That actually makes a lot of sense from a scientific perspective. What we've witnessed here with Diamond, her ability to understand complex situations, to communicate her needs, to cooperate with humans in a crisis, it's extraordinary, worthy of serious study." Connor's mind reeled with the implications. What had begun as a simple rescue was snowballing into something far beyond his control. Yet beneath his discomfort with the public attention lay a flicker of something else, a sense that perhaps Tommy's work, his vision, might reach far more people than Connor had ever imagined possible. "There's something else you should know," Ryan added, his expression serious. "Harrington's not the only one who's interested. I got a call from a representative of a major beef processing company this morning. They've seen the coverage too, and they're interested in acquiring the bloodline." Connor's head snapped up. "For what purpose?" Ryan met his gaze steadily. "For slaughter efficiency. Apparently docile cattle are easier to process. They want to buy the calf and Diamond as breeding stock." A cold fury rose in Connor's chest, so intense it momentarily eclipsed the pain in his back. "Over my dead body," he growled. "That's what I told them," Ryan assured him quickly. "But you should know they're likely to approach Martha directly with an offer." Martha's face hardened. "They can save their breath. I may be old and broke, but I'm not selling Tommy's legacy to a slaughterhouse. Some things matter more than money." The vehemence in her voice surprised even Connor, who had known Martha for more than 40 years. She caught his expression and softened slightly. "What? You think because I'm considering Harrington's offer that I don't care about these animals? About what they represent?" She shook her head. "Harrington's plan at least preserves the bloodline and Tommy's work. That matters to me too, Connor." The tension in the room was broken by a soft sound from the recovery area. The calf was attempting to stand, his good legs braced against the padded table as he struggled to rise. Diamond immediately responded with encouraging rumbles, pressing closer to the glass that separated them. "He shouldn't be trying to stand yet," Dr. Peterson murmured, moving quickly toward the recovery room door. "The surgical site needs more time to heal." Connor watched as the veterinarian entered the room and gently attempted to settle the calf back down. But the young animal was determined, its dark eyes fixed on Diamond through the glass as it continued its efforts to rise. "Tommy would say he's trying to tell us something," Connor said quietly, "that we need to listen." As if in confirmation, the calf let out a sound that was surprisingly strong for an animal so young and recently injured. Diamond answered immediately, her massive head bobbing in what almost looked like encouragement. Dr. Peterson emerged from the recovery room, his expression puzzled. "He won't settle, keeps trying to get to his mother. Medically, he should be resting, but trying to reach his mother is more important to him than rest," Connor finished. "It's what gave him the strength to survive the night." A moment of silence fell over the group as they considered the implications. Finally, Martha spoke, her voice firm with decision. "Call Harrington," she said to Connor. "Tell him we want to discuss terms, but with conditions, non-negotiable conditions." Connor raised an eyebrow. "What conditions?" that Diamond and her calf and any future offspring are never to be sold for slaughter, that Tommy's research notes and breeding records become the foundation for legitimate scientific study, that you have final approval over how the Heritage Ranch operates. Martha's eyes were bright with purpose, and that the research center bears Tommy's name. The weight of her words settled over Connor like a physical presence. For 15 years he had carried his grief like a stone, private and unyielding. The thought of Tommy's name on a research center, his work continuing in the public eye, was both terrifying and exhilarating. "I need to think," he said finally, his voice rough with emotion. Martha nodded understanding. "Take the time you need. But remember, these corporations won't wait forever, and neither will Diamond's calf." As if to emphasize her point, the calf let out another call, stronger this time. Diamond responded immediately, her massive frame pressing against the glass barrier as if trying to break through by sheer will. Dr. Peterson watched the exchange with professional fascination. "I've never seen anything like it," he admitted. "The bond between them is extraordinary. And after what you've told me about this bloodline's history," he trailed off, then continued more deliberately. "Mr. Matthews, I'm not one for sentiment in my professional practice, but I have to say, it almost feels like there's a purpose to all this. Like these animals were meant for something more than just being livestock." Connor's gaze moved from Diamond to the struggling calf, then to the blue bandana he still carried in his pocket. Tommy's bandana, now faded and worn but still a tangible connection to his son. "Ryan," he said suddenly, "do you still have the pictures? The ones of Diamond and me lifting the tree?" The younger ranger nodded. "On my phone. They're all over the internet now, too." "Show me." Ryan pulled out his phone and scrolled through several images before finding what he was looking for. He handed the device to Connor, who studied the screen intently. The photograph was startling in its clarity and composition. It showed Connor braced against the massive oak limb, his face contorted with effort, while Diamond stood beside him, her powerful neck and shoulders pressed against the wood in perfect coordination with Connor's stance. Their eyes, human and bovine, held the same expression of determined purpose. Behind them, Martha could be seen pulling the calf to safety, her small frame belying her strength. "Look at that," Connor said softly, more to himself than the others. "Really look at it." The image told a story more powerful than words, a story of cooperation across species, of shared purpose overcoming natural barriers, of understanding that transcended normal boundaries. It was, Connor realized with sudden clarity, exactly what Tommy had been trying to tell him all those years ago. "I'll call Harrington," he decided, handing the phone back to Ryan. "But first, we need to do something about these two." He gestured toward Diamond and her calf, still communicating urgently through the glass. "Doc, is there any medical reason they absolutely cannot be reunited today?" Dr. Peterson hesitated, clearly torn between medical protocol and the unusual situation before him. "The risk of infection at the surgical site is still significant," he said slowly. "And the calf's movement needs to be restricted to allow proper healing of the fracture." "But," Connor prompted, sensing the veterinarian's wavering. "But I've also never seen a recovery as remarkable as what's happened overnight," Dr. Peterson admitted. "And in medicine, we're learning more every day about the healing power of comfort and reduced stress." He sighed heavily. "If, and this is a big if, we could create a controlled environment where Diamond could have physical contact with her calf without the risk of him moving too much or her accidentally causing damage." "The treatment stall in the back," Ryan suggested. "The one with the head gate and side rails. We could secure Diamond so she can reach the calf but not move around too much, and keep the calf within reach but immobilized." Dr. Peterson considered the suggestion, then nodded slowly. It could work. But I want full monitoring equipment in place, and at the first sign of distress or compromised vital signs, we separate them immediately. The next hour was a flurry of activity as the treatment stall was prepared according to Dr. Peterson's exacting specifications. Diamond seemed to sense that something important was happening, her attention divided between the activity around her and her calf in the recovery room. When all was ready, the moment of truth arrived. With careful precision, the calf was transported on a special stretcher to the treatment area and secured in a padded harness that would support his weight while preventing movement of his injured leg. Monitoring equipment was attached, and Dr. Peterson positioned himself nearby with emergency medications at the ready. "All right," the veterinarian said finally. "Let's bring in Diamond." Connor stepped forward, positioning himself at the gate of Diamond's temporary pen. "I'll lead her," he said, his voice leaving no room for argument despite his crutches and obvious pain. "She trusts me." No one contradicted him. With deliberate movements, Connor opened the gate and stood before the massive bull, speaking in low, soothing tones that carried clearly in the hushed treatment area. "Easy, girl. Your baby's waiting for you, but you need to be gentle, understand? No sudden movements." Diamond's dark eyes fixed on Connor's face, her massive head lowering slightly as if in acknowledgement. Then, with a grace that belied her enormous size, she followed Connor toward the treatment stall where her calf waited. The moment Diamond caught sight of her calf without the barrier of glass between them, she let out a soft sound, unlike anything Connor had heard before, a rumbling purr that seemed to vibrate the very air. The calf responded immediately, straining toward his mother despite the restraints. With careful guidance from Connor, Diamond entered the treatment stall and positioned herself exactly where directed, allowing the head gate to be secured around her neck without protest. The arrangement allowed her to reach her calf with her head and tongue but prevented any movement that might accidentally cause injury. The reunion that followed brought tears to the eyes of everyone present, regardless of their professional detachment. Diamond immediately began to gently groom her calf, her massive tongue carefully cleaning his face and neck while making soft, rumbling sounds of comfort. The calf, for his part, leaned into his mother's ministrations with such palpable relief that the monitors actually showed improvement in his vital signs. "Would you look at that?" Dr. Peterson murmured, watching the readouts with professional amazement. Heart rate stabilizing, stress indicators dropping, respiratory rate normalizing. It's like a medication being administered in real time. Connor watched the reunion with a lump in his throat, his hand unconsciously finding Tommy's bandana in his pocket. In that moment, surrounded by the tangible evidence of what his son had understood so long ago, Connor felt a shift inside himself. Not an ending to his grief, but a transformation of it into something that might, with time and purpose, bear fruit instead of thorns. "Tommy was right," he said softly, the words meant for Martha, who stood beside him. "About everything. These animals understand more than we ever gave them credit for. There's something special here, something worth preserving." Martha nodded, her weathered hand finding Connor's arm. "So you'll talk to Harrington? Consider his proposal?" Connor's eyes remained on Diamond and her calf, their reunion a testament to bonds that transcended human understanding. "Yes," he replied finally. "But with our conditions? This isn't just about saving a ranch or preserving a bloodline. It's about respecting what Tommy saw, what we're all seeing now. These animals deserve more than to be statistics in a corporate ledger." Ryan, who had been quietly observing from nearby, stepped forward with his phone in hand. "Speaking of Harrington, he's been trying to reach you, Martha. Says he's got some new information that might impact his offer." Martha frowned slightly, taking the phone. "James?" "Yes. I'm at the vet clinic with Connor and the calf." She listened for a moment, her expression changing from concern to surprise. "I see. Yes, he's right here. I'll put you on speaker." She pressed a button and held the phone where Connor could hear. "Mr. Matthews," Harrington's voice came through clearly. "I'm glad I caught you both. There's been a development you should be aware of before we continue our discussions." Connor tensed, expecting bad news. "What kind of development?" "The story of your rescue, the cooperation between you and Diamond, has attracted attention beyond what any of us anticipated," Harrington explained. "I've received inquiries from the University of Texas Animal Science Department and two major wildlife conservation organizations. They're interested in potentially partnering on the Heritage Ranch concept, specifically to study and document the unusual cognitive abilities demonstrated by this Brahmin bloodline." Connor and Martha exchanged startled glances. "What exactly are you saying, Mr. Harrington?" Connor asked cautiously. "I'm saying that what began as a heritage element in a residential development might become something much more significant," Harrington replied, an undercurrent of excitement in his voice. "A full-fledged research center with academic backing and conservation support. The kind of place that could genuinely advance our understanding of animal cognition while preserving both Wildfire Ranch's heritage and your son's breeding program." The proposal hung in the air, unexpected and full of possibility. Connor looked at Diamond and her calf, their reunion a living testament to bonds that defied conventional understanding. Then he looked at Martha, whose eyes shone with a hope he hadn't seen there in years. "I think," Connor said slowly, his voice gaining strength with each word, "that Tommy would have liked that very much. A chance for his work to help people understand what he knew all along, that animals like Diamond have depths we've only begun to explore." As if in agreement, Diamond raised her massive head, her dark eyes meeting Connor's with what could only be described as understanding. In that silent exchange, something crystallized in Connor's mind, a purpose that had been missing since the day Tommy died, a path forward that honored both his son's memory and the animals that had brought them to this moment. "Tell them we're interested," Connor said firmly into the phone, "but we have conditions. Non-negotiable conditions that protect these animals and Tommy's legacy." As he began to outline the terms Martha had suggested earlier, Connor felt a weight lifting from his shoulders, not the physical pain of his injured back, but the heavier burden of 15 years of misdirected grief. In its place came something he had thought forever lost on the day his son died, a sense of purpose, of continuity, of a future where Tommy's work and vision might flourish beyond anything Connor could have imagined. The path ahead would not be simple or straightforward. There would be negotiations and compromises, setbacks and challenges. But looking at Diamond and her calf, witnessing their reunion and the healing it brought to both animals, Connor knew with bone-deep certainty that they had stumbled upon something worth fighting for. A truth about animal intelligence and interspecies connection that Tommy had glimpsed 15 years ago, and that now, finally, the world might be ready to recognize. 3 months later, Connor Matthews stood at the newly constructed fence line of what would soon be officially dedicated as the Thomas Matthews Center for Bovine Cognition and Conservation. The summer heat had given way to the gentler warmth of early autumn, painting the Texas landscape in subtle golds and ambers. His back, while not fully healed, had improved enough that he could now walk without crutches, though Dr. Peterson still insisted on regular physical therapy sessions that Connor endured with grudging compliance. "Quite a view, isn't it?" Martha remarked, joining him at the fence. At 72, she seemed somehow younger than she had just months ago, a new vitality in her step and sparkle in her eye. "Never thought I'd see Wildfire Ranch looking like this in my lifetime." Connor nodded, taking in the sight before them. The main ranch house and original barn remained untouched, now designated as historical structures. Beyond them, construction crews were putting the finishing touches on the new research facility, a tasteful building designed to blend with the Texas Hill Country aesthetic while housing state-of-the-art equipment for studying animal behavior and cognition. Tommy would hardly recognize the place, Connor mused, his voice holding wonder rather than regret. All this because of one stubborn bull and her calf. As if summoned by his words, Diamond appeared on the rise beyond the paddock, her impressive silhouette unmistakable even at a distance. Behind her trotted her calf, no longer the fragile creature fighting for life, but a sturdy young bull growing stronger each day. Though he still favored his once broken leg slightly, his recovery had exceeded even Dr. Peterson's most optimistic predictions. "Speaking of which," Martha said, "have you decided on a name for him yet?" "We can't keep calling him the calf forever, especially with the dedication ceremony next week." Connor watched as the young bull playfully butted his head against his mother's flank, a gesture that Diamond tolerated with maternal patience. The white diamond marking on his forehead, identical to his mother's, caught the afternoon sunlight, seeming to glow against his tawny hide. "Second Chance," Connor said finally, the name feeling right as he spoke it aloud. His name is Second Chance. Martha smiled, understanding the layers of meaning in the choice. "It fits him, fits all of this, really." Connor nodded, his hand unconsciously finding Tommy's blue bandana in his pocket. He'd taken to carrying it everywhere these past months, a tangible connection to his son that no longer brought only pain, but a sense of purpose and continuity. The sound of an approaching vehicle drew their attention. Ryan's Ranger truck appeared on the dirt road leading to the main compound, dust billowing behind it in the dry Texas air. Since the rescue, the young ranger had become a regular visitor to Wildfire Ranch, his initial skepticism about Connor's methods transformed into genuine interest in the Brahman breeding program. "Bringing our guest of honor?" Martha asked as Ryan parked and stepped out of the vehicle. Connor nodded. "James Harrington wanted to see the progress before the dedication ceremony, make sure everything's proceeding according to plan." Ryan approached, removing his ranger hat in deference to the afternoon heat. "Mr. Harrington sends his apologies. He's been delayed in Austin but will be here tomorrow morning." The young ranger glanced toward where Diamond and Second Chance grazed peacefully. "How are our stars doing today?" "Growing stronger every day," Connor replied with quiet pride. "Second Chance has put on nearly 50 pounds since leaving the clinic. Dr. Peterson says his recovery is nothing short of miraculous." Ryan nodded, his expression thoughtful. "The university researchers are eager to begin their observation protocols. Dr. Sanchez was particularly interested in the vocalization patterns you've documented between Diamond and Second Chance." The research partnership that had evolved from Harrington's initial proposal had exceeded everyone's expectations. What began as a simple heritage element in a residential development had transformed into a full-fledged research center, with funding from the University of Texas, 2 major conservation organizations, and Harrington's development company. The residential aspect of the development had been scaled back significantly, relocated to the eastern portion of the property, far from the research facilities and the special Brahman herd. "Speaking of research," Martha interjected, "the boxes from Tommy's room arrived this morning. All his notebooks and observations." "I've had them stored in the attic all these years, couldn't bear to look at them, but couldn't throw them away either." Connor's heart tightened at the news. "I'll go through them tonight, see what might be useful to Dr. Sanchez and her team." The prospect of revisiting Tommy's research, his careful observations and insightful theories about Brahman cattle, was both painful and deeply satisfying. For 15 years, Connor had preserved his son's memory like a fragile artifact, too precious and painful to examine closely. Now, Tommy's work would become the foundation for scientific inquiry that might change how the world understood animal intelligence. There's something else you should know, Ryan said, his tone shifting to something more official. The department has received another offer for Diamond and Second Chance. This one from a private collector in Dubai. 7 figures. Connor's jaw tightened. The answer is the same as it was to the beef processing company, the rodeo stock contractor, and the exotic game ranch. Not for sale. Not at any price. Ryan nodded, having expected this response. I told them as much, but they insisted I pass along the offer. Apparently, word of Diamond's intelligence has spread internationally. Martha snorted softly. Money can't buy everything, no matter what these people think. Some things aren't for sale. The protective agreement they had negotiated with Harrington and the university ensured that Diamond, Second Chance, and their descendants would never be sold for slaughter, exhibition, or private collection. The entire bloodline was now legally protected as part of a scientific research program with conservation status, a victory that had required considerable legal maneuvering but that Connor had insisted upon as a non-negotiable condition. Will you be ready for the ceremony next week? Ryan asked, changing the subject. The department chief says the governor may attend, and there's talk of national media coverage. Connor grimaced slightly. The public attention that had followed the rescue had been uncomfortable at first, but he had gradually come to accept it as the price of securing Tommy's legacy. I'll be ready. Martha's been helping me with my remarks. Helping is a generous term, Martha teased, more like forcing him to write something down instead of just winging it. The dedication ceremony for the Thomas Matthews Center had taken on greater significance than any of them had initially anticipated. What began as a local human interest story had captured national attention, tapping into a growing public interest in animal cognition and the ethical treatment of livestock. Connor's collaboration with Diamond to save Second Chance had become a symbol of interspecies cooperation that resonated far beyond the borders of Texas. I still don't understand all the fuss, Connor admitted, watching as Diamond led her calf toward the water trough in the distance. We just did what needed doing. Any ranger would have done the same. Ryan shook his head. That's where you're wrong, Connor. What you did, recognizing Diamond's intelligence, trusting her enough to work alongside her, that wasn't standard protocol. That was something special. Martha nodded agreement. You listened when most would have reached for a tranquilizer gun. You saw what Tommy always saw, that these animals have depths we've barely begun to understand. Connor felt a flush of embarrassment at their praise, uncomfortable as always with being the center of attention. Diamond did the hard part. I just followed her lead. The three fell silent for a moment, watching as Diamond and Second Chance made their way back toward the upper pasture, their movements synchronized in the effortless way of mother and offspring who communicate without need for words. Dr. Sanchez wants to install the observation cameras next week after the ceremony, Ryan mentioned. Non-intrusive monitoring throughout the pastures to document natural behaviors. She's particularly interested in how Diamond communicates with the other Brahman cows in the herd. The research methodology had been another point of careful negotiation. Connor had insisted that any study of Diamond and her offspring be conducted with minimal disruption to their natural behaviors and social structures. No invasive procedures, no isolation experiments, nothing that would cause stress or discomfort to the animals. To his surprise, Dr. Sanchez, the lead researcher from the university, had enthusiastically agreed, explaining that natural observation yielded the most valuable data on complex social behaviors. Tommy would approve, Connor said softly. He always said we learn more by watching than by interfering. As the afternoon light began to soften toward evening, Martha excused herself to prepare dinner at the main house, a regular ritual since Connor had taken up residence in the old foreman's cabin on the property. His new role as consultant to the research center and guardian of Tommy's legacy had made it practical for him to live on site, an arrangement that brought him more peace than he had known in 15 years. Left alone with Ryan, Connor found himself reflecting on how much had changed in 3 short months. The younger ranger had become not just a colleague, but a friend, his initial by-the-book approach softened by what he had witnessed during the rescue. "I put in for the permanent liaison position," Ryan said suddenly, breaking the comfortable silence between them. "Between the department and the research center. Should hear back next week." Connor glanced at him with mild surprise. "Thought you were gunning for a supervisor position in Austin." Ryan shrugged, his gaze following Diamond and her calf as they crested the hill. "Plans change. What I've seen here, it's opened my eyes to something I didn't know existed. Something important." The simple admission touched Connor deeply. It was, he realized, exactly what Tommy had been trying to show people all those years ago. That there was more to these animals than most humans ever bothered to see. "Well, for what it's worth, I think you'd be good for the position," Connor offered. "Diamond seems to tolerate you, which is more than she does for most folks." Ryan laughed. "High praise indeed, coming from you and her." As the sun began its descent toward the horizon, painting the sky in dramatic strokes of orange and purple, Connor felt a sense of rightness settle over him. The pain of Tommy's loss would never fully disappear, nor should it, he had come to understand. But it had transformed into something that nourished rather than consumed, a driving force behind something meaningful and lasting. The dedication ceremony the following week would make it official, but the Thomas Matthews Center was already fulfilling its purpose. Researchers, students, and even a few carefully selected visitors had begun to witness what Tommy had seen. The remarkable intelligence and emotional complexity of the Brahmin cattle, particularly Diamond's bloodline. "I should head back," Ryan said finally, settling his ranger hat back on his head. "Early patrol tomorrow. But I'll stop by in the afternoon to help with the preparations for Harrington's visit." Connor nodded his thanks, his gaze still fixed on the distant figures of Diamond and Second Chance as they grazed peacefully in the golden light of the setting sun. After Ryan's departure, he remained at the fence line, the weight of Tommy's bandana in his pocket, a comforting presence. "You were right, son," he said softly to the evening air. "About everything. Took me far too long to see it, but I'm listening now." As if in response to his words, Diamond raised her massive head, her gaze finding Connor across the distance with uncanny precision. For a moment they regarded each other in what felt like mutual understanding, not owner and livestock, not human and animal, but two beings connected by shared experience and purpose. Tomorrow would bring more meetings, more preparations for the dedication ceremony, more steps toward realizing the vision that had emerged from tragedy and rescue. There would be challenges ahead, scientific, financial, personal, but for the first time in 15 years, Connor faced the future without the crushing weight of unresolved grief. As darkness began to settle over Wildfire Ranch, Connor finally turned toward the lights of the foreman's cabin, his steps measured but purposeful. Behind him, Diamond and Second Chance made their way toward the shelter of the barn for the night. Their movements unhurried and secure in the knowledge that this land, this place, was now truly their sanctuary. The Thomas Matthews Center for Bovine Cognition and Conservation was more than a memorial to a boy who had died too young. It was a living testament to his vision, a continuation of work cut tragically short, and perhaps most importantly, a second chance for all of them, human and animal alike, to understand each other a little better. As Connor reached his cabin and paused to look back one last time, he saw Diamond silhouetted against the last light of day, her distinctive profile unmistakable even in the gathering dusk. In that moment, he felt a connection that transcended the normal boundaries between species, a recognition that some bonds, once formed, become bridges across divides previously thought impassable. "Good night, old girl," he murmured into the twilight. "We've got important work ahead of us tomorrow." And somewhere, Connor liked to think, Tommy was smiling. In life's autumn years, We often find our greatest purpose through unexpected connections. Connor Matthews discovered this truth when a massive Brahman bull named Diamond helped him save her calf after a fallen oak tree pinned the young animal down. For 15 years, Connor had carried the weight of his son Tommy's death, blaming the very animals his boy had loved. But in one extraordinary moment of crisis, when Diamond stood beside him to lift that tree, everything changed. The rescue not only saved Second Chance, the miracle calf, but also healed Connor's broken heart, transforming his grief into purpose by establishing the Thomas Matthews Center for Bovine Cognition. Sometimes the most profound healing comes when we're brave enough to listen to what life has been trying to tell us all along. Like Connor, have you discovered that your deepest wounds can become your greatest gifts? That wisdom gained through suffering can create something beautiful that outlasts us? Your life's second act might hold your most meaningful work yet. What unexpected connection has brought you healing after loss? Or what legacy do you hope to leave that honors someone you've loved and lost? Share your story in the comments below. Your experience might be the very light someone else needs today.